I'm gonna make a dress-up skirt for my 4-year-old daughter using sparkly fabric from the 1960s. This is gonna be very easy, so if you can sew a straight line and have a sewing machine, you can definitely do this. Recently, I went to my parents' house and grabbed a bunch of fabric that I still had stored there. My mom gave me this cool fabric from the 1960s. Here are some of the fabrics that I have from the 1960s that I'll be using for upcoming projects. She made some dress-up skirts for us out of this fabric when we were little, and her mom made skirts for her when she was little out of this fabric. Anyway, there were these couple of skirts that were already made. So maybe we can put them together and make them fuller. It's a little long anyway. They're very narrow, so I'm gonna put them together and make a fuller skirt. In addition to that, they were kind of put together quickly. So I'm gonna clean it up and see what we can do. Let's get started. I feel like everybody has their favorite seam ripper. If I lost this thing, I would be so sad. I don't even know if they sell it anymore. I wanna preserve as much of this fabric as I can. It might take a little bit to rip this out. If it doesn't work out the way I want, I might just have to cut it. Cutting this off would be fine, but I do really want a little bit extra to work with. I'm ripping out every few stitches. I'm hoping that this will kind of let me open up the hem quickly. Nice. This is where you put on a couple good songs or a show for the next 10 minutes and just get to ripping everything out until you're done. I've finished ripping out the waistband, the hem. Now I'm just ripping out the side seams. Once I'm done with that, I will iron it really carefully and then get working on the final skirt. A reminder, if you have cats, make sure to always pick up threads. You don't want them to end up in the emergency room because they ate them. I'm gonna use a really cool iron because this is very, very synthetic and feels like it's going to melt instantly. I'm using a piece of fabric. This is just an extra piece from a cat mat I've made. I should be using canvas to iron on, but my son is sleeping and I think it's in his room. It's not perfect, but at least it's flat. It's gonna be much easier to work with. A little more story on this fabric. My grandparents' neighbor was a buyer for a catalog, and he would come home with samples of fabric and he would give them to my grandma. She'd make things with them. This actually shows the colors available to purchase. Like they'd have individually magenta or orange, but in the sample fabric, they have these stripes on here to demonstrate all the fabric options. This is a project that should probably take you about an hour, but with all of the seam ripping and reworking the edges, it's taking me a little longer. Ravi wanted to say hello. After ripping out a bunch of seams, you're left with all these tiny little threads. So if you just take a lint brush, it helps get a lot of them out. They're ironed, all the threads removed. I think we are ready to go. Now that everything is ironed, I'm laying it all out so I can see kind of what I'm working with. I'm going to use pinking shears here. I noticed it was used on the waistband many years ago, which helped it from fraying. So there's this weird cut under here, so I'm gonna have to go with this length. It's plenty long for my 4-year-old. I'll even be able to do a large hem to let it down later. Almost 31 inches, so that's what I'm gonna do the entire way across. I'm measuring 31 inches at various points so I can connect the dots and have a pretty even hemline. So I'm pinning the top so it doesn't move, and then I'll cut the bottom at the same time. This isn't the most accurate way to connect the dots, but it'll do. Let's see if we're even here. Pretty good. This skirt is very adaptable, but each piece I have here is about 40 inches wide. I will sew the side seams first, and then I'll just have like a big circle. I'm gonna pin the side seams and just sew along. We're going with magenta thread. Now I'm sewing the second side seam. Here we go. Both side seams are sewn. Now I can work on the waistband and the hem. So elastic. This is a non-roll. It's about, looks about an inch, a little more than an inch. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna use this. 23 to give us a little extra with the elastic. How's that feel on your waist?
Good.
Okay. I'm just folding down the edge evenly here as best as I can and then putting the piece of fabric on top to protect the sparkly fabric underneath because it will definitely melt if I don't protect it. Now to make the casing, I'm going to just give
this a little extra space. So I'll be stitching right about here.
I'm just kind of eyeballing this. You know, I have the elastic right here so I can kind of check as I go along.
This is the waistband. I'm gonna stitch along here, leaving an open area for the elastic when I feed it through. I'm gonna stitch all around here so that I can put the elastic in. I think it's gonna fit pretty good. I gotta sew pretty close to the edge. I sewed the casing for the elastic. It's so much cleaner, so much straighter. It looks really nice. So now I'm gonna put the elastic in. I always keep a safety pin in my pin cushion because you always need it for elastic, and I don't like going and having to look for one. Here's the hole that I left to feed the elastic through in the casing.
Now I'm just feeding the elastic through the casing. Be careful not to let the tail end of the elastic kind of get sucked into the casing, or else you'll have to feed it through again.
Elastic is in. I did give my elastic a couple inches extra length, knowing my daughter is gonna grow and eventually I'm gonna wanna adjust the size. So I'm going to zigzag stitch around and kind of give it a good overlap. That way I can adjust later. Secure, but this will be really easy to remove and adjust in a couple years. And now I just have to work this in. You wanna make sure it doesn't fold or roll as you're kind of working it in. How pretty. This just reminds me of playing dress up as a kid because we had this same fabric and some skirts. Those are still at my parents'. Now onto the hem. Someone wrote Barbie on here. I don't know who. I'm just gonna iron like this and then pin it up to where I think it's gonna be. I'm gonna hand stitch it, but first I'll try it on my daughter to see how the length looks. Back at it again, ironing with a protective layer. I just gotta go all the way around and then I'll pin. Pinned it along here, and I'm gonna try it on her and then hand stitch it if the length is good. I decided here that it was a little long. I don't want her to trip on it, so I'm gonna make it just a little bit shorter. Pinned it up a little bit more. I think this is a good length. My daughter's watching a movie, so I'm doing the hand stitched hem. This will make it really easy to let down in a couple years. This took me about 40 minutes to hand sew. Obviously, it would have been a lot faster with a machine, but I wanted the flexibility. It turned out really smooth and flat. I'm really pleased with the results. I think she's gonna love it. Here it is, it's all done. Fabric from the 1960s. I'm so glad I was able to take those two thin skirts and make a much fuller skirt. Way more fun to play dress up in. She loves it. She put on her aqua sparkly heels. I do have a little extra of this fabric, so I think I'm gonna make another skirt. And into the pile of dress up clothes it goes.